One of my absolute favorite fights coming up this weekend. We have Belay Quebec Canada's own Charles Jourdain qui va battre contre Andre Ewell. Now, Matt, we can do this in French, we can do this in English. I'm going to choose to do it in English, but hey, if you want to see French Fight Night picks in 2022, you let me know, and I'll make it happen. I absolutely love this fight because you know what? It's Southpaw versus mostly Southpaw until we have to hit the panic button, and that one panic button is Mr. Charles Jourdain. Now, this is a guy that has a fight of the night against who? Doo Ho Choi, where he finished him. He had a wild fight against Marcelo Rojo. You want an insane stat on this fight, Matt? Do you want it?
I would love it.
Do the fans at home want it? Do you want it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts? I'm going to give it to you because for Charles Jourdain, if you take his last fight against Julian Erosa, you spice it up a little bit. That one was a catch weight at 150 because it was short notice. I'm going to call it a featherweight fight anyway. So if we do that, and we have a little bit of fun with it, Charles Jourdain has 6 knockdowns in his 6 UFC fights. If we're just considering featherweights and the greatest of all time, well, the number one up there with 11 knockdowns is Jeremy Stephens. But if you say that with 6 at featherweight, he's tied with Giga Chikadze, Shane Burgos, Teruto Ishihara, and Conor McGregor for the most knockdowns in featherweight history. If you go with 5 and you want to be like that, he's tied with Brian Ortega and Dennis Bermudez for 10th all time. So it's absolutely amazing what Jourdain has been able to do in his short time in the UFC. It's also amazing that this is his record right now in the UFC, and unfortunately for both of these men, I say this with no ounce of joy, they're probably fighting for their jobs this weekend.
It's wild that we're saying that now, because 2019, it felt like both these guys were destined to be in the rankings, and maybe not, top 10, but at least like 15 to 10 range, where on their best day, they could beat anybody in the division, and on their worst day, hey, they might not always win. But with Jourdain, he's just shown holes in his game that he hasn't been able to fix, and he does feel like the same fighter now that he was when he first came into the UFC. And that's not a bad thing, because like you mentioned, those knockdown stats are ridiculous. But with Jourdain's stats, he's kind of like Russell Westbrook. You have to look a little bit more in depth than just the assist stats, because with Jourdain, the assist in his knockdowns forward might look really good. He turns the ball over at a very high rate, though, and he gets knocked down at a very high rate, too, and that's what really worries me about Jourdain, because that stat really is a reflection more of his fighting style than just his absolute power, because I agree, he does have very good power, he's got great boxing, great body shots, too, he's got great overhands, very legit knockdown power. But the reason he's able to sort of get that next level power is because he fights like Vanderlei Silva when he doesn't have to be. If Jourdain wanted to be a little bit more technical, I think he could be on the outside. He's shown in some of his fights to be a disciplined fighter who can put together combinations who, when rolling downhill, almost looks like Giannis going to the basket. Like, Jourdain really is that dangerous of a striker. But the cardio's not great. When he faces adversity, I gotta be honest, I start to worry about how he's gonna look. And that's crazy because if you go back to his debut, gets dropped in the first round by Doo Ho Choi, gets past that adversity, and then wins by knockout, now we're starting to see him fade in some of these tougher fights.
The thing that I don't necessarily like about Jourdain, I'll go over all the things that I love. Matt, we didn't plan this, but I'm gonna throw a couple shots at you. When Jourdain faces adversity, block like Jourdain blocks. Oh no! But he kind of wilts and moves around, and he still gets hit through his guard because he just brings his hands in.
He doesn't look good. He doesn't take a shot well.
It doesn't look all that great. Now, for Andre Ewell, he can capitalize on that. Longest reach that you've ever seen in this division. And I mean, listen, when the highs have been high, Andre Ewell beats one of the greatest bantamweights of all time. That sounds ridiculous now because he's going to fight for Eagles FC, but Renan Barão. And then you look at the lowest of lows. He loses to Chris Gutierrez, knowing that the leg kick's going to be there, knowing that there might be a custody battle talked about by John Anik during the fight. Yikes. But you look at that, he loses to Gutierrez. So then he goes out there against Julio Arce. Julio Arce did the exact same thing as Chris Gutierrez. Started investing in the leg kicks to open up his hands. Now, that's an Arce staple. But I got to say, and it's probably because, former common opponent, but Vince Morales gets his legs kicked off by Chris Gutierrez. What does Vince Morales do better now? Checking leg kicks and at least moving his feet and getting out of the way. For Andre Ewell, fight over fight, he didn't invest in at least a little bit of that defense. But again, same thing can be said for Charles Jourdain fight over fight.
I just think Andre Ewell's so tied to his ways because he is so boxing heavy, especially in MMA, that he does really plant heavy on his lead leg and even his back leg when he does decide to throw shots. So I think it's almost so ingrained into his style that there's kind of growing pains almost. Like he can't kind of learn the check because if I then learn the check, then I have to sort of redo the rest of my striking game. And that's my issue with Ewell, especially in this matchup. I don't love sort of the defensive inconsistencies, I guess, from Charles Jourdain. But how I see this fight going is a lot of forward pressure from Jourdain, him throwing a lot of those looping shots, and him throwing a lot of body kicks and leg kicks. Two things that we don't really see a lot from Andre Ewell.
Best body kick from a southpaw you're ever going to see from Charles Jourdain. It's like somebody spamming it on UFC 4.
And we see body kicks a lot in MMA, but it's very rare that someone has that kick that can put their opponent down with it. But Jourdain really has that kicking power to where if he hits you clean, you're going to go down because of it. And Andre Ewell has shown not even just susceptibility to being kicked in the body and the legs before. He just doesn't he doesn't react well when he gets hit in the body. He's been hurt to the body in the past, and I worry about that being a recurring theme in this matchup because let's say their boxing is somewhat even. I definitely give Ewell the edge, but I think with Jourdain's sort of uglier, grimier style, he may make things even with the hands. Then I think about Andre Ewell. What's his plan B on the feet? Well, he doesn't throw a lot of kicks. He doesn't throw a lot of knees. He'll throw some knees up the middle, I guess. And he throws a few elbows if guys get close. At least with Jourdain, he'll throw the leg kick. He'll throw the body kick. He'll go up high with his punches. I can at least see a progression of his striking. And I can see from, okay, this is what Jourdain wants to look like in round 1. And this is what he'd like to look like in round 3.
Jourdain open a minus 225 favorite. He's roughly a minus 205 right now in best fight odds. You look at it for Ewell, open a plus 190, plus 170 or thereabouts. You look at the Tapology votes. I don't expect them to be close, but I'm going to say over under 80% Jourdain.
I'll say slightly under.
All right, we're looking at them. 839
time.
total votes, 86% Jourdain, 59% by knockout for the 14% that have Ewell, 67% by decision. Again, for Ewell, wins over Irwin Rivera, Jonathan Martinez, both those by split. Everybody's going to yell at you till the cows come home that J Mart won that fight. And then in the 5-on-in, the 3 losses, Marlon Vera by finish, Chris Gutierrez by decision, Julio Arce by finish. For Jourdain, the 5-on-in, Duho Choi, the knockout win. A loss by split to Andre Fili. He did not win that fight. A split draw against Josh Culibao, but was there a 10-8? I don't know. Then he fights Marcelo Rojo. Way too close of a fight than you'd want.
Great fight, though. Like, highly recommend watching.
And then his last time out, he fights Julian Erosa, and Julian would not get out of his face, and Julian ends up just sinking one of those classic Erosa submissions. So, for me, I look at this one. I have Jourdain, but at minus 200, I stay away and I watch it. And also, happy belated birthday to Charles Jourdain, who just turned, 26 in the last 3 weeks.
So I have Jourdain for all the reasons that Julian Erosa beat Jourdain. Who's going to be the one pressuring forward in this fight? Well, probably Jourdain. I know he faced someone in his last fight who was moving forward on him, but still, Julian Erosa only knows one thing, and that is forward pressure in the cage. And to bang. With Jourdain, I think he'll be the one going into range on Ewell. So yes, he's going to have to worry about those long-range counter shots, but other than the 1 or 2 big moments Ewell might have in this fight, I do think Jourdain will be the more consistent one. I can't believe I'm saying those words, but if he can stay dedicated to the leg kick, and if he does use kicks in this fight, especially early on, I think Jourdain will put himself in a great position to win.
You got a couple of guys who have been chintzy at best in their last number of fights. You also have Andre Ewell making the move up to featherweight for this one. Could pay dividends for him, but again, expect a slightly smaller fighter. He's a guy that's built like Matt and I. Very, very Slenderman-esque in his build. We have a big-time fight coming up this weekend, and both of us, surprisingly enough, going with the Canadian Charles Jourdain to bring that win back to Beloeil in that Montreal region. I can't wait for this fight, and Matt, up at the top, we have Derek Lewis taking on Chris Daukaus, and I know you're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.